Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. While we give it like 1 minute for people to file in, maybe you could drop in the chat if you have plans to go see the King Tides this weekend and where, and we'll give it a few seconds. Central Coast location. Manzanita, nice. All right. Northern Oregon coast, nice. That is my area. All right. Well, we'll just jump right in. Thanks for joining us. This is our final webinar of the year for our Oregon Beaches Forever webinar series. I'm really excited to welcome Rhiannon Bizor tonight, but I'm first, as usual, going to tell you a little bit about Surfrider and the Oregon Beaches Forever campaign. My name is Kaya Hazard. I'm Surfrider's Oregon Regional Manager, and Surfrider is a nonprofit organization. We work nationally, but have chapters right here in Oregon. So in Oregon, our volunteer-led chapters work to protect our ocean, waves, and beaches through a grassroots organizing and advocacy. So we work on issues like plastic pollution, water quality, beach access, and making our coastlines and coastal communities more resilient to climate change. So to that end, Surfrider has teamed up with Oregon Shores to launch our Oregon Beaches Forever campaign, now in its second year. Through this campaign, we're taking a holistic approach to protecting our beaches. We not only oppose harmful shoreline armoring along our coasts on individual and beach-wide scales, as is the case with Beverly Beach on the Central Coast, but we're also working on the implementation of nature-based erosion solution model projects and policies that promote beach preservation and climate adaptation so that we can move away from hardened shorelines. We're also advocating for local level climate adaptation and improved shoreline management at the city and county level. Recently, we worked with Clatsop County to update their comprehensive plan, which was adopted just a few weeks ago. And it has some really great language in there that protects our public beaches, which we would like to use as a model for other coastal cities and towns as they update their comprehensive plans. And last but not least, next year, we'll be working with state agencies like OPRD and DLCD on their rulemaking processes to update and improve existing regulations for shoreline armoring permitting and access to and along the shoreline. So if you'd like to learn more about this campaign and stay up to date with educational events like this one, you can find more information on both Surfrider or Oregon Shores website, and I'll drop both of those links in the chat shortly. We have one final Oregon Beaches Forever event of the year, which is an in-person King Tide watch party or tide crawl in Cannon Beach this Saturday. It starts at 11:30 a.m. at Les Shirley Park. I'll also drop the link with more information on that in the chat, and I'll turn it over now to Mandy with Oregon Shores.
Thanks so much, Kaya. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Mandy Watson. I am the Coastal Conservation Manager with Oregon Shores. Oregon Shores is a nonprofit that focuses on ocean and coastal issues all up and down the coast in Oregon. And our vision is a healthy and resilient Oregon coast where people and nature thrive together. And we work to do this by educating and empowering people to protect coastal ecosystems as well as coastal communities. We have a really strong policy team. Our policy advocacy spans from everything from influencing land use and shoreline planning decisions with our Oregon Beaches Forever team with Kaya and Surfrider, to lobbying for coastal habitat protections at the state legislature, to preventing bad development on Oregon's estuaries, beaches, and dunes. And we also have a strong education and outreach program. We run a couple different networks of volunteers. We're probably most widely known for our Coast Watch program, where people can adopt a mile of the coast to monitor and steward for a citizen science data project. And for more information, you can visit Oregon Shores. And today I'm super excited for this webinar. I've said this before, but king tides are truly my Christmas. I get super excited for the highest highs and the lowest low tides of the year. We have two more king tide events this year. And so today we're super lucky to have Rhiannon with us to let everyone know how they can participate in the super cool King Tides project. And Rhiannon is the Coastal Shore Specialist with the Oregon Coastal Management Program, which is part of the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. In this role, she works with local coastal communities to better understand coastal hazards and way to improve the resilience using the state's coastal planning goals. Rhiannon has a master's degree and a PhD in coastal geology from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the University of Melbourne in Australia. Before coming to Oregon, she worked with Virginia Sea Grant and Texas A&M University to help communities with their coastal resilience goals. Rhiannon now lives in Lincoln City with her 2 dogs and 2 cats. And this is Rhiannon's 3rd year working on Oregon's King Tide project. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rhiannon. I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Mandy. Thank you, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. As Mandy said, my name is Rhiannon Bazor, and I'm the Coastal Shore Specialist with the Oregon Coastal Management Program, which is part of the DLCD, or the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And as part of this role, I also am a co-coordinator of the Oregon King Tides Project, along with Sam Derenbacher from Oregon Shores. And so the King Tides Project is a joint partnership primarily between OCMP and Oregon Shores, but we do partner with a number of other partners, including Surfrider and Oregon Sea Grant, as well as the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. So it's really a group effort that also includes everybody who visits or lives on the coast. And so it's a community science driven effort to basically document these really exciting king tides and how they impact our coastal environments. I will go ahead and share my screen here. Just one second. And I'll go ahead and start off with just a little background information on sea level rise in Oregon and kind of how it ties into king tides and why we want to document them in the first place. So sea level rise in Oregon is a little bit different than in other places. We have, global sea level rise, which has, certain specific projections of rates of sea level rise. But on a more regional scale, we have regional sea level rise projections that take into account a lot of things that are very specific to those locations. So in Oregon, some of the things that influence future sea level rise and current sea level rise include El Nino. So during El Nino years, the water is a little bit warmer, and that makes the water levels a little bit higher. There's also a lot of more wave energy, and there's a southerly shift in the winds too. So you have maybe some more large waves, warm water, so increased water levels along the coast. We also, moving forward, are seeing warming trends for our climate. So under those conditions, we will likely see more El Nino events. And we'll also see thermal expansion of the oceans just from that warming climate. So you have warm air that's going to warm the oceans. The warmer the oceans, the higher the water level. In Oregon, we do have one thing working for us here compared to places like on the East Coast, where we have really low-lying coastal areas with a lot of land subsidence. Here in Oregon, we do have a lot of vertical land motion or tectonic activity that is making the level of the land kind of keep pace with the level of sea level rise. And it is important to note, though, that if we were to have a Cascadia earthquake event, that there would be a drop in the land or subsidence that then could not we would not have that working in our favor anymore. It would drop the land, and so we would see an increase in sea level rise compared to the land at that point. And then on a longer time scale, we do have Pacific decadal oscillations as well too. And so these are, sorry, one second. Let me move this screen here in case everybody is not able to see that. These are warm and cool periods that occur on the order of about 20 to 30 years, whereas El Nino events occur in about a decadal cycle. So these are a little bit longer, and during the warm Pacific decadal oscillations, you'll again have a lot warmer water, and so that will increase the water levels as well. And across the Pacific Northwest, some of the sea level rise projections, they have a pretty wide range, as you'll see, about 1/2 foot to 5 feet by 2100. And so why that range is so large is, again, some of that takes into consideration different local geologies and geographies. So if you have a really low-lying area of like more of the Central Coast, you might see a little bit higher compared to other places where you have really high bluffs and cliffs. Other than that, the projections do take into consideration a lot of other climatic factors that scientists can model and project forward, but there is still some variance in what those projections show. So on top of sea level rise and things like the El Nino Southern Oscillation Cycle, things like ocean circulation, if you have really large coastal storms, that can also increase the water levels. And so these are all kind of compounding factors. And then when you have king tides, which we'll focus on from here on forward, that is also an increase in the water levels. And so it's these compounding factors where each one is raising the water levels, but all together you can have a huge increase in water levels if you have a coastal storm, king tides, it's during winter, during an El Nino year, and there's already sea level rise. And so why we really care about king tides is that they give us a glimpse into the future of what sea level rise may look like in our coastal communities. So areas that are already prone to flooding or to a lot of coastal erosion, that gives us an idea that in the future under sea level rise conditions, those areas are going to be even more impacted under normal conditions, let alone during coastal storms or king tides. So documenting those impacts now helps us plan better for those future conditions. So what is a king tide? So king tides are actually not generally referred to as king tides in the scientific community. They are referred to as perigean spring tides. But king tide is the term that we use generally just to describe these perigean king tides, because that is a little bit easier, nicer thing to roll off the tongue than perigean spring tide. So they occur when the sun and moon are alignment with Earth, and when the moon is in the closest on its orbit to the Earth, and the Earth is on its closest orbit to the sun. And so the alignment and the proximity of the moon and sun and Earth all increase the already strong gravitational pull on the Earth's oceans. And during winter, this pull causes the highest high tides of the year. And again, those are just referred to as king tides. And the term king tide actually began in Australia and New Zealand and other Pacific nations. And it was a way that they started to describe these really high tides that they were noticing only a few times a year. And because they were, the biggest and grandest of the tides, they named them the king tides. And again, those king tides give us a really good glimpse into what those future conditions may look like for our coastal communities under sea level rise. And so by documenting them, the King Tides project started in Australia, and from there it kind of caught on across the globe. And the Oregon King Tides project has now been running for about 15 years. And so every winter we ask participants to be very safe when they go to the coast. During the storm events and during king tides, you can have really fast moving water, very dangerous conditions. So we ask that people are very safe when they visit the coast, and from a safe distance, they take photos and upload them to our website to help document these impacts to our coast. So again, safety measures are highly important. We like to remind everybody to not put yourself in harm's way. So you can do that by staying a safe distance away from the water, never turning your back on the ocean, not climbing on rocks or logs because those can be swept out very quickly, or have potential for a lot of damage and bodily harm, and to also be aware of sneaker waves too. And so with those photos that we do ask people to take, we are encouraging them to take images where the impacts of the tides can be gauged against some type of landmark so that we can tell just how much the high tide is increased compared to a normal high tide so that we can have that comparison. So things like having a building or a jetty, or here you can see these signs in the photo, this fence here, anything that kind of gives us a landmark point to make those comparisons are really helpful. We also like photos of shorelines, any type of beach infrastructure or estuaries or bays are really helpful as well. And submitting the king tides photos is very easy. You can just visit OregonKingTides.net. And under this participate button here, you can click it and click submit, and it takes you through just a little photo submission questionnaire here. So first it asks if you are okay with it being under a Creative Commons license, because we do upload all of our photos that are allowed under this permission to our Flickr account. And so those are all publicly available and people can use them under a Creative Commons license. And we do share all of that information with local planners and researchers so that they have access to these documented impacts as well. We also hold a contest, which I'll go over in just a minute as well too, each year. And so if you want to be have your photo submitted for that contest, you can click yes on the permission as well. You put your photo credit for your name here, and then it has a upload your photo box and also a map so that you can enter your location or click and drag your location to wherever the photo was taken. And then just some information about where the photo was taken. Was it during an average high tide or a king tide? And then what are we viewing in the photo? Is it coastal erosion? Is it coastal flooding? Is it a comparison shot? And so that gives us an idea of how we can help filter these into different research projects or planning projects based on those impacts. And so some of the information that we do ask for that is very helpful, the date, including the year. That way we can know which king tide series was it, if it was taken during November or December. Sometimes the weather conditions can be different. So a couple years ago during November, there was king tide series that happened when it was super sunny out, very calm waters, and the high tide was not as high as people were expecting, versus this last November series happened during an atmospheric river. And so there was a lot of really large waves, a lot of storm activity. And so the high tides were pretty dramatic. And so by including that information, it kind of gives us an idea if maybe the photos don't show a lot of impact or the water is much lower than expected, we can go back and kind of have an idea of why that is. Description of the photo is really helpful. If it's a comparison, average high tide versus king tide, just kind of help us get an idea of what we're looking at. Photo orientations, are you looking south or north along the coast? And then any other information that you'd like to include for the photo. Again, we hold a photo contest every year. And so we work with the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. They are kind enough to offer prizes for 4 different winners for each year of the photo contest. The prizes are e-gift cards to the Oregon Coast Visitors Association online gift shop. And this year, the categories that we have chosen are bays and estuaries, waves and erosion, coastal flooding, and then we have a new category for youth photographers. So anybody who's under 18 and has their parents or guardians' permission can upload their photos as well too. And we've been doing a lot of outreach to schools, especially Oregon Shores has. And so trying to get the youth involved in this initiative is really important because, as we all know, they're going to inherit a lot of the problems that we're already seeing now. And so getting them aware of what's going on, what can be expected in sea level rise, and getting people really excited about how to be part of a larger community science effort is really cool as well. So just a couple examples of past year's winners. The one on the left is of Seaside Airport. So as you can see, this is not actually a lake or a bay. This is the airport that is underwater during a very high king tide. The picture down below would be under the waves and erosion category, and that's one for that category 2 years ago, I believe, in Depot Bay. And we used to just have waves as the category, but we were getting a lot of really great photos of waves offshore that were not actually part of king tides or caused by king tides. And so we added the erosion because we really want to see those impacts that are directly related to king tides. So if it's a wave that is, causing any type of erosion or impacting infrastructure or the cliffside, anything like that, then that counts for waves and erosion. These are just some examples of what to submit. So we do really like comparison shots. Those are really helpful so that we can see what are the conditions during just an average high tide versus a king tide. Again, this has some infrastructure that makes a great comparison just to be able to see those water levels because it is very dramatic here. Again, another comparison shot. Along with this average high tide versus king tide. Again, some of the really helpful information would be when the average high tide was taken. Was this during summer? Was it taken during a storm event? And the king tide as well. This may have been during one of those very calm series here where it's very blue, as you can see. Not a lot of storm activity impacting the already high tides for king tides. The one on the left is great for comparison as well as for coastal flooding. So anything that is showing impacts to infrastructure or may impact travel, those are really helpful for local planning departments because, again, those areas that are already seeing a lot of these impacts are only going to get worse over time. And so the more that we can address those issues now and plan for the future, the better off our communities will be. The one in the middle, again, is Depot Bay. Very exciting shots every year that we get from Depot Bay, both from the water side and from the land side, seeing, the waves crashing up and over the cars driving past or people standing there. We generally get a lot of really exciting ones from there, as well as Shore Acres too. So if those are some of the areas that you're looking for the more dramatic places to take photos, definitely those are two good ones. If you're looking for somewhere that's more about coastal flooding or infrastructure, maybe some more low-lying areas where there is more impact from flooding would be good. Seaside is a good example of where there's generally a lot of flooding during king tides. And then we have some useful links here. We do have a website, and that is where you can submit your photos. It also has a lot of really helpful information about king tides and upcoming events. It has links to our Flickr account as well too, which is this one down here, flickr.com groups Oregon King Tides. And we try to keep it simple for all of our media, our social media. Just Oregon King Tide is, if you look that up, you can find us. We are on Instagram and Facebook under Oregon King Tide as well too. We do share photos that are submitted to us. We try to highlight safety precautions and other events that our partners are hosting, such as the King Tide Crawl this weekend. So it's a good place to check for not only upcoming king tides, but also upcoming things that you can do related to king tides too. And then we're also available on email, OregonKingTide@gmail.com, if you have any questions, or if there's anything that you've noticed that maybe a broken link on the website, or you want some help maybe submitting your photos. If you're having trouble with that, you can always email us and we'll get back to you, within a day or two and try to help you out there. In this photo here, you can just see, again, a lot of flooding on the street here, and that impacts travel. It can cause islanding between, different neighborhoods, or if you're trying to get to or from school or work, these impacts are really, starting to impact our communities in a very real way. And again, we're just going to see that more and more over time. I'll take you to our website. Here. So we do have a safety alert. Again, safety precautions should be your number one mission when you're visiting the coast, not only during king tides, but just during any time of the year. We do live on a very dynamic coast with a lot of wave activity, and so we do encourage everybody to be as safe as possible. We can see here we have some, if I can get my computer to work, we have the upcoming dates. So you can always check that. We do have a tide map as well too. And so this will show you anywhere that you want to visit. You can click on the tide gauge on one of these blue dots and it will show you, this one is for Waldport, it will show you the tide predictions for the upcoming King Tide series. So you can see what time it's best to go to your location. The times do vary across the state, and so this is a really helpful tool. You can see here for that first tide, it will be coming in at 11:11 versus if you come up here and go to bar view.
Hey, Rhiannon,
yeah.
sorry, just a heads up. We actually cannot see your screen right now, but I did put
no.
a link in the chat.
Okay, 1 second, then let me, thank you for letting me know. I will stop sharing and try to share it this way. I apologize for that. Let's see if we can get this right now. Okay, can you see the tide map now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Sorry about that, everybody. Screen sharing. How long have we been doing this now? I still can't get it. So this is the tide map. You can click on any one of these blue dots and it'll show you the tide prediction and the times of those highest high tides. So that's really helpful when you're trying to plan your trip to the coast. We can also, and these are the upcoming king tides that I thought I was showing before, but I was not. So we also have the photo focuses for the upcoming photo contest. Again, coastal flooding, youth photographers, bays and estuaries, and coastal waves and erosion. We have an about page where you can learn more about king tides. And a little bit more about the project in general. Participate is how you submit your photos. So it gives you a little bit more information about where you can go. Again, those tide maps are really helpful. And then if you submit your photos, it'll take you to the photo submission site that we looked at earlier. And you can see there are just a few questions and it's a really easy process. And then you just upload it and you're entered for our contest if you'd like to be. And we do share all of these photos to our Flickr account, which is available through the photo gallery or directly through Flickr. And so we should like to share highlights. You can browse just comparison photos. If you are more interested in the hazards or all albums so that you can see the winners from past years. These are just some of the hazard photos that we have gone over the years. And then, as I mentioned earlier, too, it has upcoming King Tide talks and events, including the one just now. And we'll also be adding the King Tides crawl on here as well, too, for this weekend. So with that, I will take any questions that we have.
Yeah, feel free if folks just want to plug them into the chat, or if you raise your hand, I could unmute you so you could talk freely. While people are thinking of their questions, I have a question for you. Marianne, do you have a favorite spot to watch the King Tides, or anywhere that you like to visit year after year?
Yeah, I'm pretty partial to Depot Bay. I think it's just really exciting, and I like to see everybody out just enjoying it and partaking and taking photos and getting splashed by the large waves coming over over the side of the cliff. I think it's just like a really cool community kind of spot where everybody gathers. I mean, you'll see, people of all ages and people who have come out of state or people who live there. It's just like a really exciting thing. Living in Lincoln City too, I like to go to kind of the Taft district, kind of by Moe's, and that's a really good place to see just how there's like a really noticeable tidal difference between low tide and high tide. And during king tides, that water just comes right up to the edge of the seawall there. Shore Acres, again, is a really exciting place for some of those dramatic waves during storms. So if it's a calm day, it might not be as exciting, but that's really exciting too. I really anywhere up and down the coast, it's just depending on what you're looking for, flooding versus really large waves, you can kind of find it all across the coast.
Awesome, thanks. And I see we have a question from Jenna. Thanks, Jenna. Jenna is wondering, are there king tide impacts on the various rivers? Would they flow into the ocean? And is it important to capture those impacts as well?
Yes, absolutely. So in our coastal rivers and bays and estuaries, during king tides, you can have a lot of inundation from the salt water, and that can push farther upriver. And so you can see flooding farther inland than you would expect. So it's not just right on the open coast that you see some of these impacts. You can have raised water levels in the river, increased time that there will be saltwater intrusion into those environments too. And so a lot of the ecosystems and plant and animal life that live in those areas are pretty well accustomed to those changing conditions. But you can see sometimes, flooding along the rivers and bays and estuaries as well. So it definitely impacts farther inland than you might expect.
Awesome, thanks for that. And then Vince is wondering, we like to watch king tides at Quarry Cove in Newport. Can you see the waves at almost eye level, which makes them look more dramatic? Ooh, yes.
That's a great one. Thank you. Yeah. And we love hearing where people go, where their favorite spots are, because we always get questions about where should we take photos, where are you maybe lacking in photos, or maybe, get more photos than than other places. And so hearing other people's favorite places is really cool. And then we can pass that along to folks too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm fairly new to living on the Oregon coast, so I'm still discovering all my favorite spots to watch, which is really exciting.
Well, in Cannon Beach, where y'all will be this weekend, is really exciting as well too. You can see a lot of impacts there.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And I see Diana has her hand up, so I'm going to unmute you, Diana.
Hey there. Speaking of Cannon Beach, so those impacts that you just mentioned, we see the dunes change drastically after king tides, and it is worrying to some members of the communities to see what was, a more gentle approach onto the beach, suddenly there's a drop off, there's a cliff. And there are people who feel as though that's something that needs to be managed. So they're wanting the city or the state to come in and grade beach accesses in these areas. Um, which would be quite an undertaking through the winter. And I would, to my mind, it's impossible to make the shoreline totally safe. But I just wondered if you could talk about the natural cycle that occurs with the erosion in the winter, and then of course the accretion in the summer. And from your state agency standpoint, how do you guys view beach access during the winter and that, incredibly dynamic time period, the way that the shoreline is changing so quickly and drastically?
Yes, that's a great point. We do see a lot of seasonal changes in the dunes across the coast, including in Cannon Beach. So like you mentioned, during winter, there is generally a pretty steep scarp or edge to the dunes there on the seaward side. And that can create a bit of a safety issue, especially during king tides or storm events. If people are down on the sand, on the lower portion of that, it creates a barrier to being able to reach safety quickly, and maybe have to, go around to circumvent that steep scarp. During summer, the sand profile is a little bit more gently sloping. You do have more accretion or more sand being deposited on the beach. And so it is a natural process of having those seasonal changes. Different types of grading activities can impact that. So those are all permitted through OPRD or Parks and Recs, their Ocean Shores Division. And so they do take those natural processes into consideration, as well as things like beach safety and recreational use of the beaches. And so it is a very dynamic system, and there's a lot to consider when altering those natural systems. On an ongoing basis, because also that can create further issues down the road too. So grading to kind of negate some of those impacts now can possibly create more issues in the future. So it is an ongoing issue in that area as well as elsewhere.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Diana, and thanks for that answer. That was really interesting. I guess we'll maybe wait a couple more seconds to see if anyone else has any last questions. Rhiannon, thanks so much for your time and walking us through this.
Thank you. And I'm excited to see the upcoming king tides again this weekend. Be safe when you visit the coast, but definitely submit any of the photos that you do take. We'd love to see them and share them with our partners too.
Great. Then with that, I think we will call it a night. Thanks everyone so much for joining.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Thanks, everybody.